Reverse. We can do a re-reverse.
A re-reverse.
And you can tell us what's happening at United.
Sure, I can
Okay.
definitely do that. So Brittany Claus, it is pronounced Claus. I always tell people I'm Mrs. Claus. So something I can tell my children as well. So nice to meet all of you that I haven't met. I work on brand advertising at United Airlines. Been there a little over 2 years, which is pretty much as long as we've actually been doing brand advertising. At least we launched our first campaign in about a decade. Hopefully some of you have seen our Good Leads the Way work that really focuses on our frontline employees. We have some new campaigns coming out actually in the fall, all around the power of our network and what can the power of our network do for you as our consumer. So look out for that in NFL and college football as well. Hi, Sara.
Hello there. Sorry for being a little fashionably late here. Sara Camden. I am head of product marketing for InMobi for our app growth and loyalty division. Been in digital marketing for about 15 years. I've been on the client in-house side at Equifax actually, so shout out to my fellow credit bureau peeps out there from Experian. And also spent time on the agency side, so kind of been on all sides of the equation, and I'm happy to be here.
Great. And a dramatic entrance.
Yeah,
All right.
gotta love it.
My name is Dave Rosner. I'm the CMO of Audigent. We're the leading data activation, curation, and identity platform. Been in marketing for a decade or so, and then agencies for a few decades before that. So excited for this reverse panel situation.
Yes, thank you so much. And this is my first time moderating, so hopefully I do okay. And in the sort of essence of reversing the script, so one of the things my team does is lead all of our media strategy and planning, all of the work that we do with cooperative campaigns like tourism boards and airline partners, and all of our influencer work. So, while our sort of topic can potentially be dry, like how do we engage the consumer and how is that changing technology, I'm going to show you and roll a video actually of how we're using influencers to talk about how to use our app.
And it's going to run right now.
Do we have the video? If we end up getting it, just let me know. I can improvise it. Okay. So anyway, it's a really cool video. You all should follow United on Instagram. We work with someone named Michelle, and she's otherwise known as LAX to Luxury. So just if you're interested in how she travels first class, she also knows how to make the best Polaris bed. But she did some work for us on how to use what we feel is the best in the industry app and how it can make your travel experience better. With that, and while we're maybe...
I think it's great to think about how do you take very technical subjects, so we work in data, and bring them back to the part where somewhere a human being has to be engaged, otherwise the whole thing falls apart. So if the video comes up, I think it's worth an interruption. I want to see it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, perfect. We can keep even talking since then. No, I agree. I think, at the end of the day, we talked a little bit about social listening today. And if we listen, we do listen to all of United's channels, but if we listen to them specifically only for advertising, we would hear a lot about people losing their bags and people's flights being delayed and probably some negative sentiment. But I think the team that is always listening is our digital technology team. And they're always looking for how to improve the United app. How can we, every time I open it, and I travel a lot for working for the company, and I swear there's always something new and different, which makes it really exciting. So no, we are listening to you, and we are hearing you, and we really take your consumer feedback to heart. And I also agree with what you said all about how do we actually talk to consumers about this, right? Because I think, digital natives, maybe our frequent flyers, they are used to using our app. Just this past weekend, I had my in-laws visit from Pennsylvania, and they are not frequent travelers. So they were asking me, do I need ID? Is this ticket good? The one I put on their app for them? I think we have all different levels of travelers, and ensuring that the experience is also smooth for them, I think is top of mind for us as well. We don't want to alienate consumers. We don't want people to feel like they aren't welcome in the United family. All travelers are here for us, and we want to make sure that their experience is as smooth as possible too, not just most of us who are probably clear at TSA free. So I'm going to start with just a little bit of an icebreaker, and our icebreaker is, if you were to sing a karaoke song right now, what song would you sing?
Okay, I'll go first. Still kind of basking in the afterglow of the Olympics. I'm going to go with Drop It Like It's Hot from Snoop Dogg. Also celebrating, we've got Olympics coming up here in LA in a few years. And also, this is my feelings about that caramel apple empanada that I heard from Taylor earlier is making a comeback. So please drop that like it's hot.
I was inspired by some of our prep for this call and thinking about United. My first thought would be Danger Zone, but I thought that might be too polarizing if this turned into a karaoke party and you had planned that. So then I went to Fly Away by Lenny Kravitz.
Love it. Mine is Take Me On Country Roads, John Denver. I went to West Virginia, so go Mountaineers. So an easy one to start. In what ways are consumer expectations shifted due to the advancement in technology? What are you seeing in your particular companies?
Yeah, so from a data standpoint, and I'm sure United is living this all the time, especially with the app, but so is Taco Bell. Consumers' expectations have changed dramatically because our expectation now is if I'm giving you a piece of information, if I'm actually making the effort to signal to you what I'm interested in, I'm expecting you to use it. So that is very complicated on the back end to manage, but if a consumer is giving you a preference, if they're giving you data and they're saying, I'm expecting a really good exchange, the expectation is that you show up and you remember what they said, remember this. Otherwise, all the experiences between the brand and the consumer start to fall apart.
That makes total sense, yeah. What about you, Sara?
Yeah, absolutely agree with that. Consumers are getting more and more savvy about the fact that data is currency, and the good news is that they're willing to, share that data with you as long as it's respected and used, the way that it's intended, and that in turn, can nurture really great experiences. Being immersed in the mobile app world, that space has been particularly challenging in the wake of app tracking transparency, but the good news is, again, that consumers will opt in, when they see that scary box that comes up, if they feel like that value exchange is clear. And United's like a great example of that. And that video showed, what a great enhancement to your travel experience that can be delivered through an app. And that would be a great case where you could probably get consumers to share and consent to letting you have their data.
Yeah, I think, with this increase in technology, right, and certainly comes the increase in data collection. We at United, hopefully most people here are Mileage Plus members. What's interesting is actually there's a number of people on our flights every single day that are not Mileage Plus members, so not collecting miles for those flights. Crazy, right? But we're collecting all of that data. We consider our data to be super valuable, right? Every time you go through security, we're paying, TSA gets paid, because that's just the government requirement. And then we also know where you're sitting on the plane, like sort of this most addressable screen on the planet. We're not the only company that is collecting all of this data. So with all of this, of course, comes concerns, especially as the news picks things up with data privacy. What are your companies specifically doing to maybe talk to consumers and educate them about this?
Yeah, I can go first on that. I think the key is just making sure that you're transparent about things and that consumers feel like they're in control. That they have a choice, that they've consented, and that they can opt out at any time. I feel like kind of in general, digital marketing and the broader digital ecosystem has done a little bit of a disservice, by not being clear with educating consumers. But like I said, they're getting more savvy about that. And I think the more that we can help simplify and help them understand that value exchange and make them feel empowered, the better off that we'll all be.
Yeah. Data privacy is such a big issue right now, and it's critical. So we work with top publishers, we work with most of the large data companies, we have our own data, work with advertisers' data. So I think the first piece is separating out, when we talk about data privacy, big tech and ad tech. So generally, consumers are very happy, I think we just heard that from the last panel, if the advertisers are using data in a way to bring them the right products. And that's ad tech. So yeah, I watched that video, or I was in that app, and that was a signal about what I'm into, so therefore, hey brands, I'm over here. And brands can now access that. I think the big tech side, which is what gets brought into this conversation, and I think gets everyone scared, but we confuse the ad tech and big tech. Big tech is I'm tracing everything about you, and I can use that information and might sell it to somebody else who's in a different business. So there's an interesting example from a car that was a car company that was using telematics and selling that to insurance companies as just a SaaS to pretend to see what was happening. And they thought that would help people with their insurance rates, but some people lost their insurance and didn't know why. And so there's a question there about who's watching and where is that data going. So I think brands have a huge opportunity right now to in the ad tech side, but when it comes to the big tech side, that's the area where we need a real different way of thinking, and we need to separate those two so we don't ruin the advertising experience when we're trying to pick something very different.
I think that makes a ton of sense. I mean, I think about it all the time. Like, so one unique thing about United is that we actually ladder up through communication. So we work really, really close with our friends in PR. And one thing, and even, sort of party of one in my house, my husband's like, does CNN or all the other news networks have something against airlines? Because they're always talking about United. I'm like, I know, I don't know what it is. But I think big tech has similar problems. And I think it's because people are interested. People are interested in what's happening with airlines. People are interested in what's happening with Boeing. People are interested in what's happening with their summer travel and what the lines are going to be like this weekend for their Labor Day travel. People are interested in their privacy, right? And I think I agree that folks who aren't in maybe this industry probably don't necessarily separate the two. They're certainly combining it. They see these emails that continue to come in, and I think it's certainly our job as a brand to figure out what is that value exchange. And I love the example on the last panel. I certainly would love this served up. Here's where you can go and your kids can play when you have a glass of wine and peace. The sort of advertisement. So would love that.
And it's just that reason why a lot of companies who you would expect or not expect are getting into the retail data space, because you guys have great data that can help enrich advertising and help make it more efficient and bring consumers more of what they want. And if you use the right data there, that's an enhancement and a huge advantage. And then you have other data that you never want to share, where people are sharing like what their meal preferences are. Maybe they want to be really careful about what they're revealing about themselves that you wouldn't bring into that ecosystem.
That is so interesting too, because I do think we all group PII as kind of one thing, right? And it is scary, and certainly we shouldn't be sharing, social security numbers and things like that. But I think people all kind of group all of our info into this one bucket of things we don't want people to know. And maybe there is a bucket of things we don't want people to know. But to your point, there's probably a whole bucket of things that would really help. Because this is such a complicated subject, especially for people who aren't working in this space day in and day out, how do you think and where do you think regulations can step in and help?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of areas, where regulation could do us some good. One being, it would be lovely to actually see us make progress on, national consumer privacy regulations versus, the piecemeal kind of state by state, having to navigate all of that. And the other area I think is maybe antitrust. The big tech companies that are kind of gatekeepers of the whole digital experience, namely Apple and Google through browsers and mobile operating systems, they kind of get to set the tone, define things like, what is privacy? Well, their definition of privacy can be very different than what, a broader definition might be. So, there does seem to be some movement in that area. And, in the meantime, we've had Europe kind of coming in and picking up the slack from a regulatory standpoint.
Yeah, from our standpoint, and we are constantly navigating all of the changing rules across America and then across the globe, whether that's CCPA or GDPR, or some of the changes, or Google introducing their privacy sandbox and all of the potentialities that could keep advertising working or break it. This is a moment where we need government intervention to say, this is too much consumer data if you're collecting it to share, and set those rules. Otherwise, we know that companies are incentivized to figure out how to optimize the data as well as they can. And that's just a great example where government regulation can really support.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I think a lot of people almost set it up to the strictest because, for lack of wanting to do it in 30 different ways, right? How do we just set it up through GDPR and kind of start there as our starting point, which is hard because that is more regulative than the rest of the United States, right? And if most of our business is coming out of here. I think another thing that's interesting, and I assume United's not unique in this way, is we actually just started executing and really planning on our first party data this year because United was so protective of this data, and it took a very long time for us to ensure we got everything to a protected privacy level where everyone in leadership or the company-wide felt comfortable enough for us to pass this data over to our agency in order to execute it on for advertising. So I imagine company, we are unique in that space, right? And so, how are you guys working with your clients and other consumers to help educate them on adopting new technologies, or when I use the word new to them?
Well, this is right in our wheelhouse in the data space, and I promise we're going to talk about the fun part of data, if you can imagine. That's the cliffhanger for our technical issues. When we're talking to clients, there's really three things to keep in mind, because there's so many layers to this. One is, what are the regulations, what are the expectations, and then what are the opportunities? And so we talked a little bit about what the regulations are. So you either have to have your own team, or you're working with partners to make sure that you're not going to get sued now and into the future, which, by the way, is not something that this group would care about, everybody in this room, 3 years ago. The fact that legal has become a part of the advertising process is a complete change to what's happened in the last 3 or 4 years in advertising. So that's real, and I think it's an interesting trend, different than usually what we talk about, which might be social media or creators or things like that. The next thing is the expectation, which we talked a little bit about. So if you're using consumer data, what's their expectation so you're good enough? Otherwise, they're just going to leave because that's the expectation. The last piece, where it gets fun, is what's the opportunity? So if we have all this data and we know what the rules are, and I think what the opportunity is for data, and where it starts to become a little less boring, is I remember the planning cycles that brands and agency had, where you'd be in strategy for like 2 years, understanding who's your customer, and what time does she wake up, and how many kids does she have, and what experiences is she into, and how's her family, and what's her personality type. You had like hundreds of character attributes. And so you would use that in your creative messaging. But then you went to buy media, and you were like, okay, I guess she's like this age group, and in this part of the country, and you weren't really able to bring those insights into the buying practice. Now, with data, you can create segmentation and test all of those ideas about who she is, and maybe even, hey, we know these are things that are of interest to her, but are those moments that for United Airlines, are those moments where she's going to listen more? So you can have thousands of segments built into your targeting strategy and really get to bring all those insights that everyone in this room probably spends months or years working on, even if they're constantly changing their campaigns. You can test those in real time.
And what's the right message for that person at that specific time that we now see the data from?
Yeah, absolutely. Just to add to that, I loved the Charlie's Angels panel earlier today, and whoever it was that talked about the nuance between outcomes versus KPIs. So really kind of focusing in, when a partner or a client is looking at exploring new technologies, new strategies, what really is that end business outcome? And then, you back into that with those KPI metrics that indicate whether you're making progress. And looking at that from a short, medium, and long-term perspective, when you're evaluating kind of the different pieces of the puzzle that need to come together for that, like who can help you reach your short-term goals, but also kind of shares your vision and can scale with you into that longer-term end goal that you have in mind. I've got a personal experience with that I can share from my days at Equifax. I implemented our first kind of social media management system, listening and managing, and we were crawling along and things were going great. We're getting a few thousand sort of mentions that we're ingesting per day, and then we experienced the largest data breach of all time about 3 weeks after launching this system. And because we've been really diligent about evaluating the partners that we work with on that. We were able to suddenly scale up from getting 1,000 mentions a day to getting hundreds of millions of mentions a day, without really skipping a beat. So, just kind of doing your homework, making sure that your partners are going to be able to grow along with you as your programs develop.
Yeah, I think, and maybe we're not going to go an entire panel without talking about Google and the cookies and the lack of maybe deprecation. But we certainly live in this fragmented media world where I'm sure everyone's media plans here include many different channels, partners, devices. How are you working with your partners and thinking about connecting those experiences across multiple devices through the consumer journey?
Yeah, in one way, it's a little bit of a renaissance of like things that were old or new again, and thinking about things more on a cohort basis, versus kind of that one-to-one vision that we once had. With Google kind of doing away with the full deprecation of third-party cookies, that death march we've been on for years. It's good news in a sense, but the bad news of that is that there still are going to be a lot of third-party cookies that will get deprecated, kind of like we deal with in the mobile world today with app tracking transparency. Like some users opt in, some opt out, and so you kind of we're going to have a foot in both worlds, and really, this is where AI and predictive modeling can come in, is to kind of marry up those two environments where you have an idea and where you don't.
Yeah, we're already well in that world because on mobile, on other browsers, cookies are already gone, and Google saying that about the cookie, that's just a complete red herring because the Google Privacy Sandbox is still happening, and instead of Google saying we're getting rid of cookies, they're going to have a box that shows up on everybody's phone or computer that says, hey, do you want to be tracked? Or something like that. And we know what happens when you throw that box up. About 75 or 80% of people say, not really, also because there's no real board to help educate people like, hey, if you're tracked, you might actually get more stuff fed to you that you want, and maybe we want to be more nuanced on it. So I think we're already there. As a data company, as we think about cross-channel, we actually have a chief creative officer because if your message isn't good and you're not thinking about what you're saying across all those touch points, and should it be sequential and should it be optimized based on your data, it doesn't matter how good you are at reaching people, you're still going to bore them by the time you show up. So we try and make sure if there are clients who, if you have great messaging, wonderful, but if you have a really good insight on your consumer, but not the right creative for all the platforms, that's fine. We want to make sure that last mile is attended to.
Totally agree. We need a media strategy that is rooted in insight and data, one that also, though, has some art to it, right? And then I think I totally agree. My creative director's partner in crime, she basically has this mantra that is, make cool shit and don't get sued. So that is literally what we live and breathe every single day. Our creative team of a lot younger than me meet every single morning for morning meeting and talk about what is cool on the internet that I'm sure will show up on my Instagram in 3 months, So we need to stay ahead of the curve with people on our team, and I think the more I've sat at different Gen Z panels, I'm not Gen Z, I've listened to them. And I think the more we can listen to our teams and ensure that everyone feels like they have a space to voice their opinion. I know a few people in the last panel talked about where people go for ideas. We actually have a whole team chat that's just called Idea Chat. It's literally, you can mute it if you want to, but it's nonstop all day with just cool ideas. Hey, what about this? Hey, what about this? Did you see someone did this? Can we do something with this? And we're just truly always trying to figure out what is the united way in, what gives us credit to talk about whatever we're talking about. I guess sort of to round this out a bit, what do you think is the next big technological innovation, or what are you and your company thinking about in 2025 plus?
Yeah, I guess this wouldn't necessarily be a next innovation, but just to point out, there's great research out there. When the pandemic hit, a lot of sort of more traditional brands or omni-channel brands, like your restaurants, like your brick and mortar stores, like travel, there was this accelerant to digitize everything. We want everything delivered. We want to, order online, pick up in store, and it was considered that might just be a blip on the radar and not necessarily a lasting trend. But as it turns out, research is showing that was an accelerant and not just an anomaly. So just continuing, obviously I'm a little biased probably being at a mobile company, but, mobile app and loyalty have become a little bit synonymous. So, having that as a fundamental part of a loyalty program and then building around that, to round out a first-party data strategy that's consented, that makes a lot of these privacy regulations and turmoil that we're talking about a lot less impactful to your business and really gives you that relationship with your audience.
It's moving so quick, right? It wasn't that long ago that I remember being amazed that I could order a Domino's pizza on my TV. It wasn't that long ago, Yeah. So I think the amount of change that has happened and how we've needed to evolve as marketers and as ad tech companies is really insane.
Yeah, there's always something amazing that's one trend away or one new platform away. I think there's a couple of things. We've got to talk about AI. So with data privacy changing, AI is going to be like bringing 100 data scientists right into whatever your intelligence platform is. So your probabilistic data set will be just as good as your deterministic data sets of today. So you won't have to have people's PII because you'll be able to take those contextual signals and create a really good picture of your consumer. So I think it helps avoid some of the data privacy issues because we don't need to know that much about people. Like all this tracking people, if they're your customers, great, and that should be private. But if they're consumers, they're putting all kinds of information out that has nothing to do with who they are as people, and I think with more AI, we'll be able to use that to create a really good picture of this is the kind of person I need, not this is you in particular. I think the other side of this is we're just going to get smarter and smarter with AI, with data. And so we got a call from Axios that was writing an article that came out today about why are publishers all of a sudden buying casual games, right? And so we did a quick poll on Insights that showed actually casual gamers are a much higher index for all of these categories, who is exactly who advertisers want, which is why publishers would want them. So I think we're just starting to realize that we have access to this data and we can be smarter about it, and that's going to open up all new worlds for us.
Yeah, and I think in how we as brands can think about what is really the right message, right? How do we balance, like a few people have talked about long-term brand. I think it was Greg Creed, I believe, who was the CMO for a little while, and also the Taco Bell CMO for a little while before that. He used to say, brand over time, sales overnight, and I think that is a mantra that we can all take, right? Like, how do we ensure we're thinking about that brand over time? One thing we talk a lot about United and building our brand and how we've really sold it into our own leadership is brand is what helps us in a crisis. Brand is what ensures that when we are having our own moment as a brand, that people will allow us to get out of it. And I think that is so important. Not only, of course, driving brand preference, driving brand choice, creating awareness for all the amazing destinations we have, but how do we build the brand so people love it, so they will give us that ability to get out of the crisis that we're in.
I love that point. It's not an either or. I feel like, brand versus performance can be a little adversarial, but it's both and, You said that helps in a crisis situation, especially.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much. So nice to meet all of you, and thank you all for listening.